Hello class, and welcome to today's lesson all about Toy Story. Oh, that was a nice sound. Oh, the pen's already kind of low.
What is that?
Do you think you can do better? How do I introduce? I actually have no idea how to introduce. So today we're going to be doing a Toy Story iceberg. That basically means we're going to go through the Toy Story franchise. I'm going to start at the top with things that everyone should know about the Toy Story franchise. And as you go down, you start to reach the more obscure and darker things about the Toy Story franchise that less people know about. Why am I making this video? I don't need to explain why, I just want to talk about Toy Story, okay, and that's fine. So let's start with the tip of the iceberg, something that everyone will know about Toy Story, and you guys aren't ready for this. It's actually like a school lesson, except I'm just a really unhinged teacher. Oh, that actually fit perfectly. Oh, did that fit in the shot? You know what? We're going to try that again. The tip of the iceberg, the Disney Parks attractions. So you might know this, but there is a Toy Story Land or a Toy Story Playland in Paris, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Florida's Disney parks. These all contain various Toy Story themed rides, attractions, restaurants, and shops that I would love to go into explicit detail about, but I have never been to any of these parks. I claim to be the biggest Toy Story fan in the world, but I'm not familiar with this. But that's where today we're going to... Oh, did I have my phone case? Sorry, I'm distracted. But today, that's going to change because for this video, I'm going to Florida. Cut to the vlog footage. Here we go.
Well, here we are at the airport, about to board a flight. Here we go. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm really cringing because people are watching me do this. Just pretend that I'm a normal human being for once.
So how about that airline food? Look at that. Currently, right over the middle of the ocean.
Airplane toilet check.
America. Okay, I don't know at what stage this bit has gone on too long, but as you maybe can tell, I'm not actually in Florida at Disney World. That was just a lie that I made for some reason. So, okay, I don't know where I left this, but I'm back from America. I didn't end up going to Florida. I actually just went to a funeral out there. Sorry. Oh, yes, we were at the tip of the iceberg. And it's already detoured enough that I went on a trip to America for a bit. So yeah, I'm going to be honest, as an uncultured Brit, despite the fact I have put this at the tip of the iceberg, I'm not the most familiar with the Disney parks stuff because that's not my cup of tea. Get it? Because I'm British? But undoubtedly, the most famous Toy Story ride at the Disney parks is Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin. This is an in-the-dark laser shooting ride where you go around on a little cart and shoot little shapes, and I've never been on it, but that's a description from someone who has read about it and thinks he understands it. It first opened at Magic Kingdom in Florida back in November 1998 and is now pretty much a staple at all of the Disney parks. It's called the Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters in California, Tokyo, and Hong Kong, but I believe the Hong Kong one's closed now, but I don't know how I would meant to know that because I've never been to Hong Kong before, but it says it has on Wikipedia. And then it's called the Buzz Lightyear Laser Blast in Paris and Buzz Lightyear Planet Rescue in Shanghai. And the general storyline of this ride is that Zurg, the best Toy Story character, by the way, and I won't be having any debates on this matter, is trying to steal the crystallic fusion cells that power the little green men's space vehicles. And you are playing the Star Command recruits that are sent to stop the evil Emperor Zurg. And you use your laser gun to shoot these targets. They're all worth a certain amount of points. And at the end of the ride, they tally up your score. And if you get over 999,999, you get Galactic Hero level, which I think means you get a little sticker. And that's your prize. Then the second most famous Toy Story park attraction is Toy Story Mania, or Toy Story Midway Mania, I think it might also be known as. This is located at Disneyland, California, Disney World in Florida, and Disney Sea in Tokyo. And this is a 4D ride where you get in a vehicle with your 3D glasses on, and you go around and go into this virtual environment that is designed to have carnival games with the Toy Story characters. They include pie throwing, darts, ring toss, shooting games, etc. And that's as far as I understand what Toy Story Mania is. And then finally, there are some Toy Story hotels at a couple of the Disney parks. One of which is located in Disneyland Shanghai, which has two sections, a Buzz Lightyear wing and a Woody wing. Not literally Buzz Lightyear's wing, a wing as in a place to stay. The rooms are all designed to look like Andy's room. There's a Lotso store, a Sunnyside cafe, a playroom, and I'm sure loads of other amenities, but again, I have never been to Shanghai, so I could not tell you. And there's also one of these Toy Story hotels in Disneyland Tokyo, which by all accounts seems very similar. But again, I would not know. Next up, we'll go with a little bit of red this time. You've got a friend in me. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Ooh. Did you guys enjoy that? So You've Got a Friend in Me, the song, has become pretty synonymous with the Toy Story films at this stage. Originally, it's played during the opening sequence of Toy Story while Andy is playing with Woody before Woody comes to life to try and emphasize the importance of Woody and Andy's relationship. And they continue to use this song in the same way throughout the other Toy Story movies, but specifically in Toy Story 2 and 3, they show that this song actually exists in universe as the characters listen to it to help the story move forward. In Toy Story 2, Woody is seen watching an episode of Woody's Roundup, the fictional show he was originally from. And a scene from this show shows Woody singing this song, and it's a key moment in Woody realizing that he needs to be there for Andy no matter what. And then also at the end of Toy Story 2, Wheezy breaks into song and sings You've Got a Friend in Me. In the same way in Toy Story 3, at the end of the movie, Buzz Lightyear and Jessie dance to a Spanish version of the song. And while it may have started as the song from Toy Story, this song has pretty much just achieved success in its own right now and has officially gone double platinum in the US. So there's probably someone out there that knows this song but doesn't know it's from Toy Story, which is a wild thought, but there's actually a fair chance. So Lightyear, I'm assuming you guys all know about Lightyear, because in 2022, Pixar officially made the official origin story for Buzz Lightyear. Essentially, this is supposed to be the movie that is the origin to the Buzz Lightyear toy that Andy watched in 1995 to make him want to get the toy, making this a fictional movie inside the Toy Story universe that also exists in our universe, and it's described at the start of the movie. In 1995, Andy went to see a movie. This is that movie. The general premise of the movie is that Buzz Lightyear and his crew have been marooned on this hostile planet, and Buzz Lightyear makes it his mission to get them off this planet and get them home. And in a sci-fi style twist, he ends up traveling 66 years into the future, and the planet he returns to is being attacked by Zurg. And spoilers if you haven't seen the movie, but you're also watching a Toy Story Iceberg video, so you probably should be aware there are going to be spoilers in this video. Zurg is actually him, also from the future, like old him, but I don't really get it. Like, Zurg's meant to be his father. That's what they say in Toy Story 2. There's like theories that maybe the original suit belonged to his father and then he stole the suit from his... Who knows? Also, in this movie, Chris Evans is the one playing Buzz Lightyear rather than the original casting of Buzz Lightyear, Tim Allen. The argument always made for this is that Tim Allen plays the toy Buzz Lightyear, whereas Chris Evans is playing the actual character Buzz Lightyear, so therefore they needed two different voice actors. Now, this caused a bit of drama when Disney first announced Chris Evans was playing him, and apparently, like, they hate Tim Allen for some reason and never want to work with him again, but I don't think this is the... I genuinely just think they think Chris Evans has more star power, so therefore the movie would do better at the box office with him as the lead. And let's just say that definitely did not work. That was it. This movie really flopped bad. It grossed $226.4 million worldwide, which may seem like a decent amount until you realize that the movie definitely cost more than that to make. And Deadline Hollywood calculated it made a loss of about $106 million, causing Pixar to offload a bunch of people who worked there. They basically didn't want anyone who was associated with this movie to ever work for their company again. That's a real shame. Next up, we've got the Toy Story video games. So there's quite a few Toy Story video games, and the first one was the Toy Story 1 video game, which came out for Game Boy Color, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and Windows. And they also made one for Toy Story 2 just for the Game Boy Color that's similar to this. And they're both basically just side-scroller games where you control Woody and Buzz and collect coins and, you know, kind of go through the story, but not really. It really shows how far video games have come along when you see that this is what they were putting out in the 90s. But leaving that behind, we can get into the really good stuff. Toy Story 2, Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. This was made for Nintendo 64, PlayStation, Windows, and Mac, and I think the most nostalgic among us will remember this being a really good game, and I still think it probably was. It's a 3D action game where you're controlling Buzz and you need to save Woody from Al's toy barn. You get to explore the Toy Story world through Andy's room, Molly's room, and just like the whole area around them that they travel through to get to Al's toy barn. While doing this, you're collecting Pizza Planet tokens to complete the levels. And while I am very nostalgic for this and actually remember playing it as a kid, I also think it's generally considered to be a very good movie tie-in game. I've looked it up. I've looked at other opinions, not just my own. I think it's considered to be good. And then we've got the best of the best. Toy Story 3 for PS2, PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, DS, PSP, and Windows. So while this game, similarly to Toy Story 2 and most other movie tie-in games, has the story mode where you basically just go through the story of the movie and complete tasks and challenges to complete the game as like controlling a character from the movie. That's how movie tie-in games work. But what sets Toy Story 3 apart is its toy box mode. This is an open world Toy Story game taking place in like the Western world from Andy's imagination at the start of Toy Story 3, and you can just like do whatever you want and you can literally live in Toy Story. What more do you want from a game? You can complete challenges, build your city up, and why am I promoting it like it's like Raid Shadow Legends or something? And then they didn't make a Toy Story 4 game, and you'd expect after this there was a Toy Story 4 game, but there wasn't. movie tie-in games seem to die off, like, in this era after Toy Story 3. It's like they hit their peak and they were like, we can never top this, so let's just stop making these games. I'm sure there also is a real reason why movie tie-in games died off, but I am not the one to explain that to you. There is not a Toy Story 4 game. That does not exist, unfortunately. However, Toy Story characters have appeared and returned in other games since Toy Story 3, most notably Disney Infinity and Kingdom Hearts 3, in between the releases of Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4. And there were also a few other games that came in the mix here. Before the release of Toy Story 3, they released a game called Toy Story Mania on the Wii, and also Windows, Xbox 360, PS3, and apparently iOS. Were people playing this on their phones? And this is essentially just a game version of the Toy Story Parks attraction, Toy Story Mania, that we spoke about earlier. You play some carnival games and the Toy Story characters. I don't know, I've never played this game, but there's probably some B-roll on the screen right now that you're watching and enjoying and in seeing what this game was like. There was also a Toy Story Racer for PlayStation and Game Boy Color, which is basically just Mario Kart, but make it Toy Story. I don't know how else to describe it. This is literally just Mario Kart. You pick a Toy Story character, you race around these tracks in the Toy Story world. There are power-ups and stuff where you can hit the other car. It's literally just Mario Kart. I will also admit I've never played this game, but I would also imagine I'd have loved it probably more than Mario Kart as a kid, so this did never tarnish my Mario Kart experience. And then finally, we've got the Buzz Lightyear Star Command game on PlayStation, Game Boy Color, Dreamcast, and Windows, which, like a lot of PlayStation games at the time, was basically just a 3D action-adventure get to point A to B game. Again, I can't claim to have played any of these last few games, but I'm hoping you're getting the idea from the B-roll footage that's rolling on screen. Which means, since we're still above sea level here, I should probably talk about the show itself, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. Close enough. Now this, before Lightyear in 2022, was the original origin story for Buzz Lightyear. Like the toys at the start of Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, the movie, there's a movie first. They put on this show, like they're watching Buzz Lightyear's origin story all together and stuff. This was the original Buzz Lightyear origin story. However, with Lightyear's existence and this show's lack of presence on Disney+, I'm assuming now it isn't canon and Disney, for some reason, doesn't want you to know it exists. And I don't know why, because like it's still above water. Like this is not something that people don't know about. We just know it's there. We just can't access it for some reason. So the adventure begins with Buzz Lightyear Star Command, The Adventure Begins, the movie from 2000, which has Tim Allen reprising his role as Buzz Lightyear and showing his origin story as he loses his apprentice and has to fight off the evil Emperor Zurg. And then there's also the TV series, which has this movie split up into 3 parts and makes up the first 3 episodes. And I think there are 65 episodes of this show. I actually made a whole video about this show back in like 2021, and I can't remember a thing about it. There's Buzz Lightyear, Neera, XR, and Booster. They're like Team Lightyear, and they do various things where they take on various recurring villains, one of which is Zurg, one of which is Warp Dark Matter. There's like one that looks like a planet. I also think there's been a bit of like nostalgia and like general consensus that Buzz Lightyear of Star Command was way better than it actually was since Lightyear came out, because everyone's like, why did you get rid of Buzz Lightyear of Star Command and give us this? But in reality, the show isn't that great. I'm really sorry. It's just like an episodical show of their adventures. It doesn't really finish at any clear point. Like there's no like final episode of the show, and it doesn't get the slightest bit repetitive after 65 episodes. I'm actually in a bit of shock how little I know about the show. Lightyear isn't bad enough for you guys to be acting like Buzz Lightyear of Star Command was the greatest thing of all time. But also, Lightyear wasn't good enough for Disney to be acting like Buzz Lightyear of Star Command doesn't exist. You know, there can be a place in the middle for this. Just put Buzz Lightyear of Star Command on Disney+, please. Next up, and this is almost news in the grand scheme of things, on the 8th of February this year, Disney announced Toy Story 5. And let's just say everyone's taking this really well. We know basically nothing about this movie at this moment in time, and basically every new piece of information coming out about it is received really well by everyone. I'm joking, by the way. Literally everyone is mad about this movie's existence, and I genuinely want it to be studied, the difference in reaction to Toy Story 5 and Shrek 5. Like, I know they're completely different franchises with completely different audiences and everything, but the demographic must have some major overlap. And oh my god, everyone is so excited for Shrek 5 and everyone is so mad about Toy Story 5. I personally don't really know what to think at the moment because, like, I mean, I wasn't expecting this movie to come out. I wasn't hoping for this movie, but, like, we also know nothing about it. So it's kind of hard to have an opinion on this when we know nothing. What we do know, though, is that both Woody and Buzz are expected to return, with Tim Allen confirming that he's returning for this movie, which I guess completely disproves the whole thing that Disney don't want to work with Tim Allen anymore. Like, where's everyone that was getting annoyed about that and didn't go to see Lightyear because Tim Allen wasn't cast as Lightyear? Well, what are you guys saying now? Where have you gone? Tom Hanks has not confirmed his return, but I assume if Woody's coming back, Tom Hanks will come back. Like, I can't imagine they're going to recast Tom Hanks. If Tom Hanks was confirmed not to be coming back, that would be justified outrage. The rest of the outrage is just noise. However, with that said, there have also been a number of deaths to, like, some of the main cast of the Toy Story characters since Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4. So, like, I don't know if they're going to do what they did with Don Rickles in Toy Story 4, where he died just before the movie, so they just reused like old recording footage of Don Rickles as Mr. Potato Head and kind of like significantly reduced his part in the movie, or if they're just going to recast a load of the characters like they did with Slinky for Toy Story 3 and 4. But for now, that is all speculation. Toy Story 5 is coming, apparently, but we know very little about it. The TV specials. So there are 2 Toy Story TV specials that came out in between Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4, kind of showing some adventures that the gang and Bonnie got up to after Andy passed the toys on to her. The first of these is Toy Story of Terror, which aired on ABC for the first time in October 2013, and is kind of like a Toy Story Halloween special, and I genuinely think is a really fun concept, to be honest. So the premise of this special is that Bonnie and her mum are on a road trip, but are facing a few issues on the road and have to take a stop at a motel for the night. Naturally, with Bonnie being Bonnie, going on a road trip, she has to bring basically all of her toys along with her, and they're in the back of the car watching a horror movie, which sets up the premise for like this Toy Story horror movie style thing. The toys go out to explore the motel, and one by one they all start to disappear until it's only Jessie left. And this is one of my favorite things about this. Jessie finally gets her moment in the spotlight. She gets to be the lead of this special. And through the help of a Combat Carl toy, who was also separated from his owner in the motel, they discover there's this iguana owned by the motel manager who's been trained to steal toys so that the owner of the motel can sell them on. And in almost perfect parallel to Toy Story 2, Woody gets sold and boxed up and almost sent away until Jessie, facing her fear of getting put into storage, goes and saves Woody in the last second, and the motel owner gets caught for this, and he's like, I would have got away with it if it wasn't for you meddling toys, except he doesn't know the toys are alive. It was Bonnie that caught him, I guess. He gets in trouble, like quite a lot of trouble actually. Like he fully gets like caught and arrested and stuff. And then we have the second TV special, Toy Story That Time Forgot. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest. I think this is my least favorite piece of Toy Story canon that exists. I remember watching this when it came out in December 2014, and I honestly thought it was kind of boring. Like, you know, I was just praising them for giving Jessie the lead role in Toy Story of Terror, and how, like, I think it was good to give a new character the spotlight, especially a character like Jessie, because she's been a core character in 2 of the Toy Story movies up until that point, and was like, it was nice to finally get her moment in the spotlight. In this special, the lead is Trixie. You know, like Bonnie's dinosaur toy? That's the lead character. She's been in like 5 minutes of Toy Story up until this point, and she's the lead. And basically her whole thing in this special is that she's annoyed that when Bonnie plays with her, she doesn't play with her as a dinosaur. Because, you know, like Bonnie's super imaginative and stuff, so plays with her as other things. And I guess that could be an issue that a toy would face if they were alive. So that part I'm kind of okay with, I guess. And the plot of the special is set into motion when Bonnie goes to play at her friend Mason's house. And the toys discover the playroom, which, similarly to Toy Story 3, interestingly, this one, has just the worst political landscape of any toy playroom ever, and is being run by these, like, Battlesaurus reptilian dinosaur toys. And while Trixie at first is excited to meet these other dinosaurs in the hope she actually gets played with as a dinosaur, it's quickly realized by the rest of the toys that these dinosaurs have not been played with yet, so therefore still think they're real dinosaurs. You know, in the same way Buzz still thinks he's a space ranger in Toy Story 1. And therefore, naturally, as all dinosaurs who think they're real dinosaurs would probably do, they take the non-dinosaur toys as prisoners, where they want them to fight in an arena together. Only for Bonnie and Mason to come into the playroom just before Woody and Buzz get killed, play with all the dinosaur toys, but not as dinosaurs, which helps them realize they're not dinosaur toys, because apparently that's how it works. And this, of course, all helps Trixie realize that the job isn't to be a dinosaur, but it's to be there for Bonnie when she needs her. On to the next thing, the Toy Story toons. So alongside the TV specials, Pixar also made 3 animated Toy Story short films in between Toy Story 3 and 4, again, showing the adventures of the gang with Bonnie. The first of these is Hawaiian Vacation, where Bonnie is going on holiday to Hawaii, and Ken and Barbie, who are at Sunnyside, obviously know about this, so sneak into Bonnie's bag in the hopes that she brings them to Hawaii with her. The only thing is, Bonnie packed a different bag for her holiday as she did for daycare, so Barbie and Ken only get as far as her room. So the rest of Bonnie's toys bring Hawaii to them in the snow. Which brings us to the next short called Small Fry. In this one, Bonnie brings Buzz to a fast food restaurant where it looks like Andy is working, except this can't be Andy because Andy surely knows Bonnie and Bonnie's mum and he doesn't like acknowledge them in any way. I don't know. This does look like Andy though. And Bonnie, not for the first or last time I should add, loses Buzz at this fast food restaurant. I think I prefer this one to the Hawaiian Vacation just because it explores a bit more lore in the universe, as Buzz stumbles upon a support group for discarded meal toys. And I just think that's really funny because no one ever plays with meal toys. They just get discarded and they must like have like real psychological issues from that. And meanwhile, I completely forgot to mention this because I was trying to blame Bonnie for losing her toys all the time, which does happen, but the reason why Buzz got left behind mostly was because there's a meal toy version of Buzz Lightyear who takes his place in Bonnie's bag and tries to replace him in Bonnie's room, hoping that no one will notice, but everyone can tell that that's not Buzz. So the mission of the short is to get Buzz back and send this meal toy back to where he came from. And it's a good shot. I actually quite like that one. And the final Toy Story toon is Partysaurus Rex. And this is so far clear the best one. Like, guys, it's got the best character in the lead role, and I love the concept of bath toys. Like, I had bath toys when I was a kid, but you only play with them when you're in the bath. So, like, they're all just sad because they're not getting played with most of the time, but they think the reason they're getting played with is because the water's being turned on, so they get Rex to turn the water on because none of them have hands to turn the water on, and then when he turns the water on, they have this, like, rave because that's what gets them to play, and I don't know, like, I love the idea of this social hierarchy among toys, you know? And also, there's a mat that looks like Sully's fur that's seen in the bathroom. What does that mean? I don't know, this isn't a Monsters Inc. video, don't ask. And while those are officially the Toy Story toons, since Toy Story 4's release, they have released a couple more Toy Story shorts, which I'm just gonna group in with this. Firstly, we have Lamp Life. This is a Disney Plus original because by the time Toy Story 4 was coming out, 2019, Disney Plus was also coming out, so it just kind of lined up nicely. They made a little short about what Bo Peep was getting up to in between Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 4. Essentially, her story, because she's basically attached to the nightlight, is that she'd be used as a nightlight. Kids would get too old to need a nightlight, so she'd get passed on to another owner who needed a nightlight until they'd get too old, until they'd get, and then just, you know, the cycle repeats. And she also apparently had a brief stint where she traveled the world until finally reaching the antique store where she got glued down onto the lamp until she met Giggle McDimples, who helped her escape, where they went on to live their lives as lost toys in the play area, where obviously they went on to meet Woody. And another thing that was released onto Disney Plus following Toy Story 4's release around the same time was Forky Asks a Question. Now, this one's different because it doesn't take place before Toy Story 4, but actually takes place after Toy Story 4 and shows Forky trying to learn about the world by asking questions about the world from other toys in Bonnie's room, because he's a spork, so he doesn't know anything. And he asks questions ranging from what is money, what is a pet, to what is love, and the other toys in the room tried to give him a relatively simple explanation to what is generally a very complex question, and Forky just doesn't listen to them. Like, he just completely zones out and doesn't pay any attention, and then has some profound realization at the end of every episode where he's like, oh, I get it now. Well, weirdly, the leitmotif from Monsters Inc. plays, you know, like the dun 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 dun. Sorry, I completely butchered. Let's just. They play that. I don't know why though. Ultimately, when it comes to Lamp Life and Forky Asks a Question, I think they're both a bit of fun. I remember when Disney Plus first came out, they were the first things I watched on it, but I don't really have too much of an urge to watch them again, and I do feel like when it comes to Forky Asks a Question, once you've seen one episode, you've seen all of them. And with that, we should get into the next thing on the board, except no! We're not done with the Toy Story shorts. There are so many Toy Story shorts. Have you heard of the Toy Story Treats, which were like these little bits of animation Pixar made for ABC to use as bumper footage? There's like 50 of them. They're all like 10 to 30 seconds long, and they're kind of just like, don't go anywhere, we'll be right back after the break. But don't worry, they're not canon or anything. Like, they're just literally self-aware, fourth wall breaking things. Some of them feature Sid's toys in, so that doesn't really make any sense for the canon. There's still an Andy's old house, which obviously he moves out of that house at the end of Toy Story, so like, why would they be having these conversations in the old house after the events of the film? But they exist. And then they did it again for Toy Story 2 in 2000. And realistically, yeah, I don't think they really come under Toy Story toons. They probably should have been under the surface, but I didn't want to go into them on their own later. So good for them, you know, they're overachieving, they're higher than they should have been, and I'm happy for them. Let's move on to the next thing. Okay, let's do the Easter eggs. So Pixar are pretty well known for their Easter eggs in their movies, and Toy Story, being the first Pixar movie, was the first movie to introduce a bunch of these Easter eggs that were going to become staples of their films into the world. For example, the Pizza Planet truck. So this is in every Pixar movie, other than The Incredibles, for some reason, and it was first introduced in Toy Story, where the actual Pizza Planet restaurant exists, and Buzz and Woody literally get in the Pizza Planet truck to get to Pizza Planet. So like, it's got a full part in the story, and this then appears in Toy Story 2, 3, and 4, and again, various other Pixar movies. We also have the Luxo ball showing up for the first time in Toy Story, and again, it has a more notable appearance in this movie than it does in most other Pixar movies. Like, they actually like interact with it, and it plays a part in the plot rather than just kind of sitting in the corner of a shot as it does in pretty much every other Pixar movie. And then we have A113, which is in every Pixar movie other than Monsters Inc. for reasons that keep me awake at night. I cannot work out how this isn't in the movie when they have so many close calls. Like, how is A113 not in this? It's fine. Fine. As of course in Toy Story, this is Andy's mum's car's number plate, and again of course shows up in the other Toy Story movies, sometimes in the same way, sometimes in a different way. The Toy Story 2 one's pretty fun because they literally say it out loud rather than showing it, and you probably would miss it because you're not really listening in because it sounds like background noise, but it's actually there. Interestingly though, another staple Pixar Easter egg is that they have an Easter egg which is a reference to their upcoming project after the movie that you're watching. And Toy Story doesn't really do this. Firstly, Toy Story 1 doesn't have an Easter egg for A Bug's Life. It does have an Easter egg for Toy Story 2, and I'm not just saying that as like, oh, well, they hint that there may be. So no, they literally have an advert for Al's Toy Barn in Toy Story 1, which I think is a clear as day reference to Toy Story 2. And then with Toy Story 2, they don't have any Easter eggs for Monsters, Inc., which I think is kind of weird, because at that stage, like, they're established. They know they're doing these Easter eggs, and they consistently do them after this. So, I don't know, they just kind of missed this one, I guess. Toy Story 3 then kind of weirdly makes a reference to Newt, which is Pixar's unfinished movie that they never made, but then it also does have references to Cars, which I guess counts as the Cars 2 Easter egg in there. And then Toy Story 4 does reference Onward just about, if you wait all the way to the end, and I'm talking like after the end credits, and like zoom into this bouncy castle that has the unicorn, which is on Barley's truck from Onward. And those are most of the key Easter eggs from Toy Story. They got established. Also, very interesting with the first Toy Story movie, they actually make a lot of references just to famous movies in general that I'm assuming like the directors and creators of the movie really liked. For example, Buzz Lightyear and Zurg is one just big reference to Star Wars, and they continue that on in the other movies by making a Star Wars reference in pretty much every Toy Story movie. Like in Toy Story 2, you've got Zurg saying, "I am your father," and then you've got the big baby throwing Lotso like Darth Vader throws Palpatine in Toy Story 3. And then in Toy Story 4, there's literally an Obi-Wan toy in the background of one of the shots, and Ducky and Bunny also make a reference by saying, "In a galaxy far, far away, you got kicked in the head." Boom! You also might notice that the carpet in Sid's house looks rather familiar, and that's because it's the carpet from The Shining. Another one that's probably a little bit closer to home and more obvious is that when Andy's moving house, you can hear his mum listening to Hakuna Matata from The Lion King on the radio or on a CD. I don't know how she was consuming it, but she was listening to it in the car. Hakuna Matata, what a wonderful phrase. Jurassic Park is also referenced when Rex roars at Mr. Potato Head during the Strange Things sequence. I literally just think they use a roar from Jurassic Park in that scene, like literally just the soundbite. And they also make another reference to Jurassic Park with Rex in Toy Story 2 when he's chasing down the tour guide Barbie car. And we could go on, but I don't really want to spend this whole video going through the minor similarities and parallels of Toy Story to other movies, because you literally could spend all day doing it. So we're going to move on. Not to the next thing on the board though, because we've got the Toy Story cameos in other movies to talk about. Yes, the Toy Story characters appear in other Pixar movies. Who could have guessed? The first one of these is, of course, Woody appearing in the A Bug's Life blooper reel gag. Jesse appears in Monsters, Inc. as one of Boo's toys, and then Rex also shows up in Monsters, Inc. also in the blooper reel gag where he's shown as like a monster going to work by Mike and Sully. Buzz appears by a toy box in Finding Nemo. Rex, again, also shows up in WALL-E in like WALL-E's human hut of human things he collects, and there's also a spork in there. Lotso is seen in a little girl's room when the house is rising up in Up. Oh, I get why that's called that now. Sid apparently shows up in Coco, but it's just a guy wearing his skeleton shirt, and apparently the character is meant to be designed to look like Skrillex, so not 100% sure if that's Sid, but you know, close enough. And then finally, Duke Kaboom appears in Jack Jack's crib in The Incredibles 2. And you still might think we're done with these Easter eggs, but we're not. They also have a lot of Easter eggs to shorts in the Toy Story movies, and we're really gonna try and quickfire through them because I've been talking about Easter eggs for way too long. Firstly, all the books on the bookshelf while Woody's having the staff meeting are references to Pixar shorts titles up until that point. Luxo Sr., the parent of the famous Pixar lamp from the Pixar short Luxo Jr., also is apparently the lamp that knocks Buzz out of the window. Now, I want to dispute this because I feel like they're different colors, but I'm not doubting they used the same model or something and just changed the color, so we'll give them that. Never say I'm not kind. Like, look at me giving them away Easter eggs for free. Another one is when Ham is channel surfing in Toy Story 2. The channels they go past are all Pixar shorts. Jerry, the guy who repairs Woody in the most satisfying scene in movie history, is also Jerry, the lead character from the Pixar short Jerry's Game. And he also has some chess pieces in his repair kit, which I'm assuming is a reference to Jerry's Game. And also with Jerry, he appears in a picture at the antique store in Toy Story 4. And don't even get started on this antique store because there are a bunch more books referencing a bunch more of their shorts. And then Tintoy, the eponymous character from Pixar's first ever award-winning short, also shows up in the antique store where he meets Woody and Bo Peep. And when I say we could keep going with the Easter eggs in this antique store, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on uncovering how many Easter eggs are in there, we are not going to do that today because we've been talking about Easter eggs for way too long. Let's move on to the next thing. The Toy Story musical. So Toy Story the Musical is a rock musical made for the Disney Cruise Line. It's 55 minutes long and has 6 original songs, and You've Got a Friend in Me, the song we referenced earlier, featuring in this musical. Again, I've never seen this musical, but it opened in 2008 and it's located in the Walt Disney Theatre on Deck 4, which means it's time to... No, okay, this isn't even on. I'm not going to say that was a bad joke first time. It's not funny the second time. And that is all I have to say about the musical. You see how much easier that was than Easter eggs? Let's move on to the next thing. Academy Awards. We've reached the surface, but I'm assuming most people probably know that Toy Story has won and been nominated for many an Academy Award. The most notable of these being Toy Story 1 winning a Special Achievement Award at the Oscars for being the first ever fully computer animated movie, and also became the first ever animated movie to be nominated for Best Screenplay. Toy Story 2 got nominated for Best Original Song at the Oscars, and actually went on to win the Grammy for Best Original Song for a motion picture, television, or other visual media award. I think that's an award. Toy Story 2 also won the Golden Globe for Best Picture, Musical or Comedy, which is like an animated movie won the Best Picture at the Golden Globes. And I bring this all up because this was before there was a Best Animated Feature at the Oscars, so Toy Story 1 and 2 were never in contention to win that because the award didn't exist, but we can only assume they probably would have won it had it existed in 1996 and 2000 when they won their awards. The Best Animated Feature award did in fact exist though by the time Toy Story 3 and 4 came out, and they both did win it in their respective years. And Toy Story 3 specifically went on to receive 5 Oscar nominations, including a nomination for Best Picture itself, making it the last animated movie to this day to be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. Also going on to win the Best Original Song, and it also won a Grammy and a Golden Globe, like you name it. This movie swept it up. To be honest, I feel like everyone knows this still, but let's talk about Rotten Tomatoes. So far, we've covered that Toy Story has won a lot of awards and made an awful lot of money, but we haven't covered the most important thing when it comes to movies. It's Rotten Tomatoes score. And Toy Story is, I don't know if this is fact-checked, but it has to be the most successful franchise of all time on Rotten Tomatoes. Not only do Toy Story 1 and 2 both have 100%, as in 0 negative reviews, and Toy Story 2, for a point, had the record for the most reviews without having a single negative one at 100%. Meanwhile, Toy Story 3 and 4 have scores of 98 and 97% respectively, meaning the franchise's overall Rotten Tomatoes score on like a mean average is 98.75%. So as I said, I haven't actually fact checked it, but if you can find a movie series with 3 or more movies that has a better mean average score than 98.75%, congrats, you proved me wrong. But I don't think you can. You guys heard of the Toy Story comics? We're below the surface now, so maybe you haven't. Now, there are quite a few Toy Story comics which are essentially just the movies adapted into comic book form, which is a pretty typical thing for a successful movie to do. Especially when the movie's animated, so the art style's already there for you to use. Like, I think a Toy Story comic is just an inevitability. Also, alongside this, there are a bunch of featured comics revolving around the fictional series inside the universe, being Buzz Lightyear's Star Command and Woody's Roundup. I think the Woody's Roundup comics here are actually books, but close enough. But what was most shocking to me was that from 2009 to 2010, Toy Story had an original comic book series which is potentially canon to the universe, made by Boom Studios. Like, I put this relatively low down because I haven't heard of it, but also not too low down because I feel like I should have heard of this. Also, that's all the information I can find on these. Like, I would love nothing more than to whip these comic books out right now and sit down and read them to you in full, but I couldn't be bothered to buy them online. So if you want me to do that, make sure to smash that like button, and if you do, maybe I will buy them and never tell you about it. Which brings us on to another thing that I feel like everyone knows, but apparently maybe they don't. Toy Story 2 is almost deleted. This goes like viral on like Twitter or Instagram every like 6 months. And at least 3 or 4 people from my personal life who I haven't spoken to in a while will send it to me like, oh my God, Seamus, did you know this? And I like it because they're like trying to reach out and share a common interest, but also, of course I know this. It goes viral every 6 months. I already said that. The story behind this goes, there was a Pixar employee who was doing some routine file deletion and clearance and accidentally typed in the command /bin/rm-r-f* on the Toy Story 2 folder, which caused everyone working on it to just see things start to disappear, which, as you can only imagine, probably caused absolute mass panic throughout the entire headquarters. Following this, they did manage to get the servers shut down relatively quickly, but not before 90% of the film was deleted. Yes, 90% of Toy Story 2 was deleted by accident, and just like there was no backup of it. Also, they fought. That was good because I used the second camera. It's subtle. It's just art, man. You see, Galen Suzman, who was working for Pixar at the time and was on maternity leave, had a backup of the movie stored in her house where she was working on the movie on maternity leave. So she and another employee went back to her house, picked up this computer, wrapped it up in a bunch of blankets, put it in a car, drove it to the Pixar studios where they were able to then recover the entirety of Toy Story 2. If that isn't like the most high pressure situation when they were driving the car ever, I don't know what it's like. I recently moved house and was getting nervous about moving a TV and stuff, but can you imagine having to move the entire 500 million movie Toy Story 2? For the sake of my journalistic integrity though, this is more of a legend than anything, and they scrapped most of the movie they lost anyway, but it's a nice story. Also, you may have noticed that I said she worked for Pixar at the time. That's because recently, as of like a year ago, they fired her because of Lightyear's failure at the box office. She saved a $500 million project in Toy Story 2. That gives you immunity for life, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if this is Pixar's fault or if this is Disney. I want to blame Disney because I don't want to blame Pixar, but I don't know. I don't think that's okay. And now, class, as you can see, we're reaching the lower end of the iceberg. Let's get into theories. Andy's mom is Emily. Like, you guys have got to respect how good I am with space management. I get this right every time. So in my not so humble opinion, I would say this is probably the most famous Toy Story theory, and it's that Andy's mum was actually Jesse's original owner, Emily. Now, it mostly stems from the fact that the cowboy hat Andy wears in the first Toy Story is not actually Woody's hat. As you can see, Woody has like a brown hat, and Andy's hat is kind of a shade of red and looks awfully familiar to Emily's hat. You know, Jesse's original. She's wearing basically the same hat as Andy, you know. Maybe there's a few years of wear and tear, but it's pretty much the same hat. And if you put this together with the fact that Andy's mum's name is never specifically said in the movie, and when Emily donates Jesse and the rest of her Jesse stuff, she never donates the hat, there's a plausible chance that Emily could actually be Andy's mum, and she passed the hat down to Andy, only for him to inherit Jesse later on in his life. I also think a further bit of evidence that no one ever talks about with this theory as well is that when Andy first gets Jessie, he notably does not know her name. He refers to her as
It's Bazooka Jane and her jet-propelled horse.
And this makes sense because why would Andy know Jessie's name? She didn't come in a box, she didn't have a label on her saying her name. He'd have to be like really knowledgeable about his Woody's Roundup lore at like 6 years old to know what Jessie's name is, and I don't think that's plausible. But in Toy Story 3, when he passes the toys on to Bonnie, you'll find he does, in fact, know Jessie's name.
This is Jessie, the roughest, toughest cowgirl in the whole West.
And who could have provided him with that information? You know, potentially his mum, who maybe once owned that Jessie doll, and was like, oh my god, I used to have a toy like that. It's called Jessie, by the way. And he was like, oh, I was calling it Bazooka Jane. I'll call it Jessie now. That's how I imagine the conversation went down. And Pixar still haven't denied it, so we're going to take this as a win. Sid is in Toy Story 3. Again, I fit it in perfectly. So there are a few theories that are made about Sid in the Toy Story universe, and this is, in my opinion, the most famous one, that he ends up becoming a garbage man in Toy Story 3. Now, this is on the basis that there's a garbage man in Toy Story 3 that we see wearing the skull shirt that is Sid's trademark as a kid. Now, Pixar have never confirmed this to be Sid, but the fanbase see this as too obvious a nod to not be Sid, and while it may seem like a bit of a stretch that we don't get to see his face, and the only real connection is that he's wearing a shirt that he once wore as a kid, so therefore he must be the same person. Yeah, I agree. It is a bit of a stretch, and it's the same with the guy from Coco earlier. But there's an element to this theory that makes me see it in a new light. You see, Sid is the only one in this universe that knows that toys are actually alive because they broke the rules to speak to him. And therefore, the reason he became a garbage man was so he could intervene. He could save any toys that have been thrown out by their owners and seen as useless and about to be put into the incinerator. He can save these sentient beings' lives. And that is quite the redemption arc for Sid, who in my opinion never really did anything wrong in the first place because he was literally just a kid blowing up toys for fun. Like, he didn't know they were sentient. He didn't need a redemption arc, but he got one. Maybe. Where is Andy's dad? Now, this is probably the main question that Toy Story theorists like myself back in the day tried to tackle, and there have definitely been some of us who got pretty close to finding the answer to this question, but there is also still a little bit of dispute over what the true answer is, I will say. So Andy, in the Toy Story movies, is being raised by a single mother, but we know there must have been a dad in the not too long ago past because he has a sister who is, like, barely able to walk. She learns to walk at the end of the second movie, so, like, she is under a year old, you know, or at least someone there to make his mum pregnant like a year ago, but by the time of the first movie, there is no father present. And the general belief is that it fell into one of two categories. Either they recently got a divorce, or the dad recently died. And I think at first, most people thought it was more likely the divorce. Firstly, there are a few clear signs that there may have been a divorce. Andy's mum doesn't have a wedding ring on her finger. There are no photos of his father around the house, and the family are moving to a smaller house, which, again, all implies divorce. But following an interview the Super Carlin brothers had with Mike Mozart, friend of the now dead Joe Ranft, who worked on the movie, he claimed that Pixar's intention was that Andy's dad was in fact dead. And this actually makes a lot of sense. I know I said there are no photos of him around the house, but if you actually take a close look at the photos around the house, you'll see it's a kid that looks like Andy, but he's specifically wearing glasses, something that Andy has never been shown to need or wear. And what if those pictures around the house were actually of Andy's dad, and apparently that was the intention. Again, according to Mike Mozart, who said that Joe Ranft told this to him before he died. And the theory actually goes on to explain that Andy's dad was called Andy and passed down Woody to Andy, but Woody doesn't know that he is Andy's son's toy and still thinks he's with the original Andy being his dad because they look so similar. And if that's true, that's crazy, but it has also been disputed by Andrew Stanton, another one of the brains trust at Pixar, who was there when they were planning this all out, and where he specifically said on Twitter that he was there and this wasn't the case. So for now, the debate of where Andy's dad is rages on. The real toys of Toy Story. Now, it goes without saying that a lot of the toys in the Toy Story universe are just based off real toys from the real world. I mean, you've got Mr. Potato Head, the Green Army Men, Barbie, obviously, and there's quite a few interesting stories about the toys that inspired them. Some of them they even got into legal disputes over, and, well, let's start with Barbie, because this is the most famous toy and it's very topical right now. Interestingly, Mattel did not want to give Disney the rights to use Barbie in the first Toy Story because they did not believe the movie would be a success. They were wrong. Toy Story was the most successful movie from 1995. And since then, Barbies have been a feature of every Toy Story movie, having a quite significant part in Toy Story 3. And I know this isn't going to be the most popular take this specific year in 2023, but that is still my Barbie and Ken, and that is the best movie with Barbie and Ken. They are amazing and incredible in that movie. There's also an interesting story with G.I. Joe, as Hasbro were actually going to let Disney use G.I. Joe in the movie, but found out the role they wanted for G.I. Joe was to be blown up by Sid in that scene where they watch Sid blow up a toy at the start of the movie. And upon finding out that was the role for G.I. Joe in the movie, Hasbro pulled out, which made Pixar come up with their own G.I. Joe knockoff, Combat Carl. And now Combat Carl has become a staple of the Toy Story series, even having a significant part in the TV special we went into earlier, Toy Story of Terror. Another interesting one is that in the original plans for Toy Story 3, Lotso was actually meant to be a bear from the early 80s Care Bears line, and this was changed relatively early in production, but if you go to the art of Toy Story 3, there are still some examples of storyboarding where Lotso was a Care Bear. Giggle McDimples is a clear knockoff of the Polly Pocket toys, which was a line of toys and accessories from the 1980s. Don't know what that means. Wheezy is based on the Linux mascot, Tux. Duke Kaboom is based off Evel Knievel, who was a stunt motorcyclist from the 60s and 70s, and the toy is, of course, based off all the toys and merchandise made off of Evel Knievel in the 60s and 70s. And interestingly, his son tried to sue Disney over the creation of this toy, claiming they were profiting off a character they admitted was based off Evel Knievel without asking permission, but it was ultimately dismissed by a judge. And then finally, Gabby Gabby was inspired by the Chatty Cathy doll from the late 50s, early 60s, and I don't have that much to say about this other than the fact if this came up in a Toy Story trivia quiz and it was one of the only questions you got wrong and made it look like you don't know as much about Toy Story because you didn't know what toy inspired Gabby Gabby, that is not Toy Story trivia, and you have every right to feel robbed when you got the actual Toy Story trivia questions right but lost the quiz because of questions like the Black Friday reel. So this is in reference to a now infamous reel of Toy Story shown on Black Friday 1993 to the executives at Disney. The reel is now completely available to watch online and specifically shows the scene of Woody knocking Buzz out the window in the quite pivotal scene from the first Toy Story. And while it's definitely not uncommon for a movie to have an original cut that they show to the executives and producers that isn't as good as the final take because they fix a few things and change a few things, Star Wars had the same thing. This reel was so bad, it nearly ended with the movie being cancelled on that day then and there. The problems with the scene are that in this version, Woody deliberately throws Buzz out the window and admits to it, because the creator's intention at the time was for Woody to be an antagonist who gets redeemed as opposed to a protagonist that you're meant to feel sorry for. Fortunately though, obviously they didn't actually scrap it. They made a few changes to the movie, fixed those issues, and look at the movie we got. Who's laughing now? Disney. Disney are laughing now because they made so much money off it. I think it's worth billions, so yeah, good for them. And to be honest, with that all said, Toy Story had a pretty troubled production in general, which brings us on to the next thing. I'm being for real this, I'm actually going to write it down. Deleted scenes. I'm sorry, the pen's starting to run out of ink, but there's a lot of deleted scenes to talk about, especially from Toy Story 1. So with most animated movies, because they take so many years to make, and specific people spending months upon end just to make one scene, it's a bit harsh to cut a scene out of the movie. So the story is usually pretty fleshed out by the time they're actually animating. But since Toy Story 1 was the first of its kind as a fully computer animated movie, they learned a lot of things and learned a lot of mistakes that they weren't going to make again, and a lot of things got changed relatively late in production. And one of my favorite things about the deleted scenes from Toy Story 1 is that a lot of the ideas that they ended up scrapping ended up coming back in the later movies. Like, there are 3 separate opening ideas that got scrapped, and all of them ended up coming back in the later movies in one way or another. So firstly, there was an idea to do an opening for Toy Story where it's more of a fantasy sequence where Andy's playing with Woody, but you're seeing what he's seeing in his imagination. This obviously is basically exactly what they did for the opening of Toy Story 3. Then another one of the ideas for the opening is called Woody's Nightmare, where Andy has disregarded Woody for Buzz right from the start and ends up throwing him away. And well, this is literally a scene that happens in Toy Story 2, just under a slightly different context and circumstance. And the final opening idea was actually a glimpse into the Buzz Lightyear show or movie and cutting to Andy watching it with Woody. And again, this is kind of how Toy Story 2 opens, with a glimpse into the Buzz Lightyear video game, only to cut away to Rex playing it. There's also a few scenes from the first Toy Story that got cut because they were a little bit too dark. One of which is with Andy's favorite toy from when he was a baby, this rattle, who explains his experience with Sid and how he had another rattle toy that got thrown out onto Sid's garden, and basically tells it like it's a horror story of how he got tortured by Sid and he got away easy this one. And admittedly, it probably was a little bit too dark. And then the other one, when Buzz and Woody arrive at Sid's house, there is a full animated scene of Sid torturing Buzz and Woody right before like the interrogation bit. But it was concluded that this was a bit too much, because at this stage of the movie, especially the kids watching will be very attached to Buzz and Woody and won't want to see them getting hurt in such a way. They did still burn Woody's forehead though. It's also quite well known that there were a few major changes the movie went through during its production. Like, it was originally meant to be called You Are a Toy, which I think works pretty well as a title for the first movie, but not really the series as a whole, if you get me. Like, Toy Story 3 being called You Are a Toy 3, it doesn't really work. Buzz was meant to be called Luna Larry, and originally the part was actually offered to Billy Crystal, who turned it down, went on to say it was the biggest regret of his career turning that part down, and immediately accepted the role of Mike Wazowski when Pixar offered it to him several years later. And I know we're living in the universe where Tim Allen's Buzz Lightyear and Billy Crystal's Mike Wazowski, but like, how wrong would that be? If Billy Crystal was Buzz Lightyear and someone else was Mike Wazowski? I think that's even worse in a way. Like, I don't know, I can't even wrap my head around it. Also, way earlier in production, Tin Toy was actually meant to be the main character of the movie, and then eventually they came up with the idea of Woody. And finally, when Woody was first thought of, he was actually meant to be a ventriloquist doll, but obviously that was changed later into production. And I also think this is another thing that was kind of came back later, with Toy Story 4 having the Benson dolls, and it kind of fits up to me that like maybe Woody was meant to be a ventriloquist doll when he was meant to be an antagonist in this movie, but ultimately this all got changed at a later stage. That was a lot of stuff. I don't know if that made sense, but I said a lot in one sentence. Lotso was originally meant to be in the first Toy Story movie, but he actually got cut, but his character model was already made, so they actually put him in one of the scenes in Andy's room. So yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but there are a lot of issues with Toy Story when it was first made, and fortunately, there weren't nearly as many from what I can tell about Toy Story 2 and 3. There are almost no deleted scenes from these movies, at least that we know about, and the ones we do know about are like, firstly, from Toy Story 2, Woody was actually meant to get accidentally knocked into the yard sale, which I am so glad was changed. Like, he'd been broken, he'd seen Wheezy, had basically forgotten about, and then did everything in his power to save him, only to accidentally get stuck in this yard sale where he got bought, or stolen, more specifically. And also, apparently in Toy Story 2, there was meant to be a character called Senorita Cactus, which was planned to be one of the members of Woody's Roundup gang, but ultimately got replaced by Jessie. But then, fun fact, the character Senorita Cactus is still canon in the Toy Story universe and even shows up in Toy Story 4. Meanwhile, Toy Story 3 has no deleted scenes that I know about or can find. Like, there's no public information about the trouble behind this. Was this just like the perfect movie? No issues when making it? But then, that brings us to Toy Story 4, which definitely had a more troubled production than the prior two movies, and I think it was delayed like 2 years. It was originally meant to come out in 2017, but didn't come out until 2019. So firstly, there's an alternate opening, which is more in the style of Toy Story 3, where it's one of Bonnie's fantasies, where the toys get in like a full-on battle with these flying books. Apparently, she was having issues at school, I think was the plotline here, and she didn't like books or reading, so the toys were fighting her books in a imagination sequence, I don't know. There's another scene that was cut where Buzz Lightyear meets a bunch of knockoff Buzz Lightyear toys at the carnival, which I feel like sounds fun, but doesn't really add anything to the story. Also, the scene where Woody and Bo Peep go looking for Duke Kaboom takes way longer in the original cut. Like, that scene goes on for about 5 minutes, and it just doesn't end. Fortunately, they cut it down quite a bit for the final movie. And then finally, there's an entire alternate ending, which I am so glad they didn't go with, where Bo Peep gives up being a lost toy as she sees this kid who is the one for her. Meaning Woody, at the end of the movie, has to give Bo Peep up again to go be with this kid. Can you imagine if they'd ended it like that? That would have actually been a war crime. I would have actually sued, I think. I think I would be in legal disputes with Disney right now. And with that comes an end another one that we spent way too long talking about, so let's move on. Andy's coming! You get it? Because that's what they say in the... There's a car honking outside, so I hope that didn't ruin that take, because that was a quite a well-maneuvered set piece. Essentially, the premise behind it, if you've never watched the Toy Story movies and somehow don't know, is that the toys have to freeze when the humans are around, so the humans don't know that they are alive, and therefore continue to play with them, and they can continue to live their lives as toys that humans don't know are alive. Meaning, when the toys are owned by Andy, the call they make when he's coming back and they have to go back to their places and freeze is, Andy's coming! And they also do the same thing in Toy Story 4 with Bonnie's coming, but it doesn't quite have the same ring to it. And the reason I bring this up is because this sparked a bit of a myth that if you shout, Andy's coming at the Toy Story cast members at a Disney park, they have to collapse to the ground and freeze. This obviously isn't true, because if it was, I feel like the power of this would be completely abused by all the park members and would be way too much effort for all the people playing the Toy Story characters. Like, no one would want to be getting into a Woody costume and having to collapse 400 times a day. So it's not true, but this was a thing once upon a time. These are getting more obscure. The live action Toy Story. Okay, now if you're not familiar with this, you're probably like, wait, there's a live action Toy. Did they do the thing they did with The Lion King where they made like a live action version of it that's actually animated, but they called it live action? No. It's not bad. This is actually one of my favorite things in the entire world. Essentially, there's this YouTube channel called JP and Beyond who have made the entire Toy Story movie live action, mostly using stop motion, and it's on YouTube completely free to watch, garnering over 50 million views, which I have to say, completely deserved. It's a classic YouTube video. If you haven't seen it, then I don't know how you've managed to get here without seeing it, to be honest. I put it relatively low down just because there are some people that clearly aren't on the internet and probably don't know that's a thing. But then again, they're not going to be watching this video, so the logic is not logicking, to be honest. They've also made various other live action scenes from Toy Story movies and are definitely a channel worth checking out, but have specifically also said they have no plans to make another live action Toy Story movie, mostly because it would just be too much to do some of the set pieces from the other movies. Like the first Toy Story, relatively simple. Toy Story 2, that's going to be complicated to shoot in live action. And there have also been other live action Toy Stories made by other people that have also been very successful, but that was the first and most prominent one, so that's what I want to talk about in this video. But there are loads of live action Toy Stories if you want to check them out. Circle 7's Toy Story 3. This is another one I've actually made a video on before, so if you've watched my videos, you're probably familiar with this, but I feel like this is lesser known. I, for some reason, just went inside the iceberg with this one, which is like the one unspoken rule that I feel like I had throughout this video. I just broke it by accident. Basically, if you can cast your minds back to the 90s, before Disney owned Pixar but were distributing their movies, Pixar basically signed a deal which agreed to let them own the IPs to their characters. So when they were disputing over Disney actually just buying Pixar outright, there was a moment in the negotiations where it looked like it might fall through, Pixar was going to be bought by someone else. Disney threatened to make sequels to the movies they've already made without their jurisdiction, and yeah, essentially this was the final straw for Pixar to go, yeah, you can buy us, we just want to make Toy Story 3 ourselves. And the Toy Story 3 plot goes like this. Buzz starts malfunctioning and accidentally scratches Andy one day. So the toys intervene and send him back to the factory where he came from, which is of course in Taiwan. But when they discover that Buzz isn't actually going to be repaired once he returns to the factory he came from because he's actually part of a huge recall, the whole gang set off to Taiwan to go find him and save him from this factory where he's being recalled. I don't know what Andy's doing in all of this, by the way. Like, he's just not noticing all his toys have gone to Taiwan for the week, but let's just let that go. And I assume what would have happened is they would have gone there to save Buzz, but also ended up saving all the other toys from this factory that were getting recalled, and it would have been a nice happy ending. And it actually doesn't even sound like that bad a movie. Like, if they were to make a Toy Story 2.5 in between 2 and 3, I'd be here for it. I'd like this movie. Andy's clones. Okay, you might see this and think, wow, they're taking the Star Wars references to a whole nother level here. Because there's clones in Star Wars, never mind. So Andy's clones is a reference to the fact that in the first Toy Story, if you look at all of Andy's friends, they're all just his character model being completely reused. This was because Toy Story, being the first ever fully computer animated movie, was rather difficult to make, and there was absolutely no precedent of it ever being done before. It was honestly seen as a pipe dream for a while by most, and one of the biggest challenges was actually making human characters. So there really aren't many human characters in this movie. I think that's probably one of the main reasons actually why Andy's dad isn't in Toy Story. So when Andy was having a birthday party, they just like did not show many of these kids' faces. They show them running around, and then in the one scene where you can actually see all their faces, you can tell they're all Andy. Other than this one kid, who clearly doesn't look like Andy. So Andy doesn't really have clones, but Pixar did clone him, technically. And interestingly enough, technology moved forward so far by the time of Toy Story 4 that Andy's design was almost completely unrecognizable. So yeah, in Toy Story 4, there's a bit of a flashback scene where they show Andy playing with Woody and Buzz when he was younger, and in that flashback scene, Andy looks like this, which is on the contrary to this from Toy Story 1. This led to lots of articles claiming he was unrecognizable, and some weird conspiracy theories that he actually had plastic surgery at the age of like 8, which I regret even spending one sentence of this video talking about. And I really don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the outlier here, but people are saying this is unrecognizable. This is a good redesign. Like, even if you take away the contextual clues of what he's doing, you can tell this is Andy. If you compare it to Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3, he doesn't even look that different. He was redesigned for those movies too, basically. I'm sorry, but I've been holding on for that for too long. People are complaining about nothing. That is not an issue. Next up, we have probably the biggest question from the Toy Story series that there isn't really a clear answer for. And I would argue I'm in the like 0.00001 percentile of people when it comes to knowledge on this topic, and still believe to this day I have the best answer to it. So I'm going to provide it again and write this down. I need to write it down first, but let me write it down, then I'll get the answer. What gives toys life? My best theory comes from my most recent video about this, and it's basically if a human has a memory of a toy or an object being a toy specifically, that object or toy can come to life. And that's all you need. You just need a human to have a memory of you being a toy and you can come to life. Because the issues that are created throughout the series is like some things that would be considered toys, like wooden blocks, can't come to life. But then a spork, if you put googly eyes on it, can. How do you explain them? Well, Andy wouldn't have had memories of the wooden blocks being toys. He'd have seen them more as just objects and maybe even props for his playtime. Whereas Bonnie fully sees Forky as a toy. Also then, when it comes to toy death, I don't think they can die of diseases or anything like that. Like, dying to them is being broken to the point of beyond repair, you know? Like, if you've been destroyed to an extent where you're just parts and no longer a toy, I think at that stage you're dead. But like the whole thing of like, oh, Andy could be playing with one of his dead toy's corpses and not realize if the toy had died is just stupid, because toys don't get sick and ill. Like, that's just not how it works. There's no example of that ever happening. So yeah. Toys can die, but it is mostly like them being destroyed, not through sickness. I mean, I still get annoyed that Etch-a-Sketch and Mr. Spell can just walk around Andy's room and like move and stuff. That doesn't make sense, but this can help explain that. Essentially, that's my theory. If you disagree with it, then good for you. I don't care. And it just means that some weird things can also probably come to life, which I guess brings us on to the next thing. Okay, so as I said earlier, things are going to start getting a bit non-PG now. It's going to get weird. It's going to get dark. So just be wary. You know, what do they say at the start of like a movie? Viewer discretion is advised. Are sex dolls alive? The question that people have wanted me to tackle for way too many years. I was making Toy Story videos as a teenager, as a child, and people have been commenting, can you talk about Toy Story sex dolls? Well, here you have it. You happy? I'm finally old enough to talk about it. And here's the problem. I absolutely cannot think of one reason why a sex doll can't come to life in the Toy Story universe. You happy? I've said it. Sex dolls almost definitely can come to life in the Toy Story universe because people see them as toys. So by my own logic, if people see them as toys and play with them as toys, it just depends on your definition of playing as, they can literally come to life. Yes, I can't think of any reason why they can't, guys. But Disney aren't gonna say it. Can you imagine like if Disney just decided to randomly announce, yeah, Toy Story 5, Woody and Buzz are coming back, but not in the way you think? Part of me thinks in a weird masochistic way that people would actually be more excited for the movie if Disney decided to do that. Be like, yeah, finally going against the grain. I mean, beyond anything, this is just a joke that people like to make. And I feel like every person that makes this joke thinks they have thought of this joke for the first time. And I see that joke every time. Like, there's just, this joke, it comes up too often. So, like, you're not original if you thought of this joke. If you're watching this video and you think, oh, it's so funny, it's not. I'm so bored of it. But yes, they can. You think we're having fun talking about sex dolls? Well, now it's gonna get dark. I'm gonna need to like tilt this down a little bit maybe. Toy Story 2 post-credits. So I'm assuming people are gonna be somewhat familiar that at the end of Toy Story 2, there is a bit of a post-credit scene where they go through and literally animate bloopers to the movie as a joke at the end of it. It's very funny. I think it's one of my favorite things. Like, it's so Pixar to go through and painstakingly animate bloopers to a movie that literally can't have bloopers. But the reason I bring it up is because these bloopers actually made headlines back in 2019, as one of them was cut from the new versions of the movie. But I have a VHS tape of Toy Story 2 and you can never get rid of it from there, Pixar. Now the scene in question is of Stinky Pete talking to two Barbies inside his box, and Woody goes, what's going on in there? And Stinky Pete's going, well, I'll be able to get you a bigger part in Toy Story 3 if you, wink wink nudge nudge. And the fact that that was like so considered normal that it was okay to make a joke about, like that people just knew this was going on so well that they were just cracking jokes about it in a Toy Story movie is wild. And while I don't think necessarily the people who made the joke are bad people, one of them definitely was, and also was definitely getting away with this, and it's probably why they made the joke, and we'll get into that in a second. But also, this is a joke that's going to go over most kids' heads, so it probably isn't that harmful, but I understand why they removed it. The Bo Peep and PETA drama. So in some of the craziest internet drama of 2019, PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals organization, called out Bo Peep saying she should retire her crook for this movie, claiming the tool is historically used to hook lambs by the legs and neck in the wool industry. This got the exact response one could have imagined, Everyone got mad at PETA because PETA are annoying, and I'm a vegetarian. I'm allowed to say it. Guys, you can't even hate me. I'm a vegetarian. I'm on your side. but you're annoying. But I feel like by that stage when they were calling her out, which was like in 2019, the year the movie was coming out, it was pretty final that they'd done this design. So like, I don't think that Pixar would have had time to change it. And Disney never responded to it. But at the end of the day, it gave them probably loads of free publicity. So they were probably really grateful that Peter called them out. Is everyone having fun out here? We're getting really close to the bottom of the iceberg. And it's gonna get worse. Let's go. Toy Story 4 is anti-religion, apparently. Oh, this is fun. I'm having so much fun. So when Toy Story 4 came out, similarly to Lightyear actually, it sparked some outrage from the Christian group 1 Million Mums. And I can't claim to have heard of this group before, but I do wonder, like, was there always a million mums? Or did they, like, change their name as the number of people in the group went up? Or, like, what happens, like, if someone leaves? Like, is there exactly 1 million mums? Like, what if one of the mums dies? They have to get in a new mum? Like, is there, like, a constant, like, re-recruiting process for this group? But apparently, in Toy Story 4, there was, and I quote, a dangerous scene depicting a lesbian couple in the movie. Okay, so let's see how dangerous this scene actually is. Oh, that's it. I wouldn't have been able to tell you there was a lesbian couple in that. This is why it's annoying. It's not even good representation. That's the crazy part. That's actually bad LGBTQ representation because they're barely on screen. And it's still sparking outrage. Like, Disney, you might as well go all in. And I know that's kind of what you did with Lightyear. But, like, I'm telling you, the reason Lightyear flopped is not because there's an LGBTQ couple in it. The outrage and boycotts from there being an LGBTQ couple in Toy Story 4 and Lightyear are the same. The results of the movie's success is not to do with that. This isn't a thing, you know? I don't know if I'm even making sense at this stage or if I'm just rambling, but I also want to say this obviously isn't all Christians or all religious people. I also had a look up when I was looking up, is Toy Story 4 anti-religious? And I found an article by the Catholic World Report, which said the countercultural message was wonderful. So maybe it also is a religious piece in a way. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm moving on. I just want to stress before I say anything here, nothing I'm going to say for the next section are my ideas or my words. But there's a theory that Toy Story 3 is an allegory for the Holocaust. Can I even be monetized? Is this video just going to get demonetized? So this rolls on from the fact that at the start of the movie, the toys are being abandoned and sent to Sunnyside Daycare, which in this analogy is meant to be a concentration camp. Making the first piece of evidence in favor of this idea being that their first plan to avoid this fate was to go hide away in the attic, which of course is a reference to Anne Frank. Then, when they arrive at Sunnyside, they're moved to a room where they are overworked and abused to the point where they're basically begging to be broken, or obviously begging for death. And the only way out of Sunnyside is through the waste chute, which of course leads to the dump, where there is an incinerator where you will be burned to death. Of course, a reference to the gas chambers. Really dark considering the absolute tragedies of World War II and the Holocaust. Definitely not intentional from the creators of Toy Story 3. Obviously, I kind of inferred to this earlier, but let's talk about the John Lasseter allegations. So for some context here, John Lasseter was the founder of Pixar, and Toy Story was essentially his brainchild. He was the director of Toy Story 1 and 2 and was heavily involved in production and writing the stories for 3 and 4. But in November 2017, Lasseter took a 6-month leave of absence after acknowledging allegations of workplace sexual misconduct that he described as missteps. This involved kissing, grabbing, and making comments about people's physical appearances in the workplace, which is obviously very uncomfortable, especially with the power dynamic that he is literally their boss. He is the head of this company, and was something that Pixar seemed to know about, which is kind of like... And as of 2018, Disney finally announced that John Lasseter had left the company. Now, obviously, this is hard to hear, as so many people have connected to Toy Story throughout the years that it was made by such an awful person, but at the end of the day, like, there are so many people that worked on Toy Story. There are hundreds of creative minds making these movies reality, and he's just one of those people. And while he is obviously an awful person, there are so many great people that would have worked on Toy Story. And all in all, Toy Story is something that's always going to mean everything to me because it's my favorite film franchise of all time. And I'm going to say it, I'm looking forward to Toy Story 5, guys. I'm sorry. Also, Disney, if you want to give me a role in Toy Story 5, just send me a message because I'm all it is, you know? I don't know. You don't have my number most likely, but like you can contact me. You can easily contact me. I'm a very easy person to reach. And there we have it. There is the video. I want to thank Fraser, Einabber.
Hello.
Thank you for letting me use your set today.
It's okay.
What did you think of the video?
I thought it was amazing.
How long have I been filming for?
4 hours. And
Just today.
This is the second recording.
This is my Toy Story Iceberg. I hope you enjoyed that. This took ages. If you enjoyed this video, let me know if you want me to do other Iceberg videos. What would you like to see icebergs on? If you don't want to see it, then I will never do it again. Don't worry, because this took way too long. See you around and see you bye. Okay, thanks.